Hey guys, how you doing? Luna here with a new video. Welcome back to the channel. As you can see, today I'm not too excited to make this video. I'm not all that happy. The main reason for that is that technically we're not talking about music here. We're talking about something related to music, but we're not talking about any albums or songs. For the last couple of weeks, I've been doing some research on John Lennon's discography. I wanted to make some videos for the channel. One of them was ranking his entire solo output, and the other one was basically ranking every song he released with the Beatles. And in order to make a proper list, you need to understand the background, the behind the scenes of every song, how they impacted not only the music industry, but also John Lennon's own craft as a songwriter. Especially when you look at 1967 and 1968, you see probably the biggest shift in his songwriting style, and I think that there's a certain someone that had a very big influence in that change of style he had in those 2 years, and that person is Yoko Ono. And that is precisely the reason why I didn't want to make this video. I've been researching music for half of my life. I know a lot about Yoko Ono, and I know a lot about, people's opinion on her work. And most of the times that I see people discussing Yoko Ono, I see a lot of racist comments. I see a lot of people, making her ethnicity an argument for criticism. And that's something I really don't want to participate in because I don't think it's right. Personally, I don't really like any of her work, and I'll get to that in a minute when we go deeper into the video. But the reason why I'm saying this is because I want the comment section in this video to have opinions, to be about the content of the video. I don't really want insults based on people's ethnicity or race. I don't really want to deal with any of that because they're comments that bring nothing to the table. This is a discussion on how her career and her own musical ideologies affected John Lennon's musical output in the 70s, which has some of his most criticized work. Okay, so this is what this video is going to be about. Anything that goes outside of music are not really gonna be answered, and actually I might even delete them because I want the comment section to be a place for people to have opinions about music, not so they can, pull out their anger based on someone's race. So yeah. In order to answer whether or not Yoko ruined his career or not, we need to look at John Lennon back in 1967 when he was doing things like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, All You Need Is Love, I Am the Walrus, and A Day in the Life. Songs that he went on to say were some of his favorites. But when you look at 1968 and his transition to that year, you'll find probably the biggest shift in his songwriting style of his career, and the fact that Yoko Ono came back to his life in that same year led a lot of people to believe that it was her influence that made this change in his songwriting style. Even though they met back in 1966, they started collaborating in 1968 when they were having this affairs behind Cynthia Lennon's back. Even though they were already pretty much divorced, they were not going through a good moment, they were still together, so it counts as an affair. That added up to all the criticism that John Lennon was facing at the time, and people didn't really start off with the right foot when it came to Yoko Ono because they saw her as, the person that basically got John Lennon out of his marriage. But personally, I don't give two fucks about that. We're not talking about that on this video. The fact is that in 1968 is when they started collaborating, and that gave birth to the beginning of the Unfinished Trilogy, the album Two Virgins, probably one of the worst pieces of music ever made. It's considered this avant-garde pioneering project, but honestly, when you listen to the album, there's barely anything in it that can be called music. Yoko just moans through the whole thing while John tries to play a few keys on the piano and then tries to hit a few things, adding a little bit of percussion, but overall, it's a waste of your fucking time. It's a terrible album. Again, one of the worst pieces of music ever made, and a fitting beginning for such a bad trilogy because it really does represent how terrible the following two albums were going to be as well. It was clear that their first collaboration as artists wasn't all that fruitful, and it didn't inspire any of them because, again, if there's a proper name for the album, would be uninspired bullshit. And when you look at Yoko Ono's background, you know that she was a part of the flux movement, and among other things, because I understand that the flux movement was a very big community of artists, and there's a lot of good things that came out of it, but for the most part, one of the driving ideologies were the anti-music and the anti-art ideology, which basically said that you don't need to be a musician, you don't need to be good at singing, at playing the guitar, playing the piano, you don't need to know anything about music even to make music. You can just make any sounds you want, and that has to be counted as music. I understand where the thought comes from. Music is subjective, and if you don't like something, someone else is probably gonna enjoy it a lot. But they took it to a whole new level where anyone could make any fart sound they wanted, and that has to be called music and should be considered as a proper form of, the art. And you don't really need to be that smart in order to understand why that is an issue, because Yoko Ono continues to have these ideologies, and that leads to performances like this. People are entitled to like what they like, but I genuinely don't know a single human being on the face of this earth that genuinely feels like that is a good performance. No matter how you look at it, that is terrible. Not even from a from a vocalist's point of view, she's not even hitting the notes properly. There's nothing proper about her performance, and I know that a lot of people went on to say, well, what about the Velvet Underground, for example? Lou Reed can't sing. Okay, but he's trying to put up a, he knows how to write songs, so he makes a good melody. So even if he doesn't know how to perform the melody, it feels genuine. The performance is an actual expression to communicate a feeling or paint a scenario, but she's actively trying not to sing properly, because that's, what the flux movement is all about, what the anti-music and anti-art movement is all about. And there's a lot of people that, go to her defense in the comments saying, oh, she actually doesn't know how to sing, and she's proving to people that even if you don't know how to sing, you can express yourself with music. She knows how to put a tune together, dude. Like, she knows how to sing very well, and you can hear that in albums like Double Fantasy and Milk and Honey. She knows how to be melodic, she just chooses not to, and she calls this music, and I have a huge problem with that. And that kind of, anti-art mentality got stuck to John Lennon in the late 60s and the early 70s, and that led to albums like Sometime in New York City, the rest of the Unfinished trilogy like Life with Lions and the Wedding album. And not only his music, but when you look at his political ideologies, they were definitely affected by Yoko Ono's input as well. When you look at the whole Bend for Peace movement, where he tries to solve issues that are really complex and have deep-rooted issues that go back hundreds of years, and have a lot to do with cultural differences, which is a really hard thing to overcome for a lot of cultures. And he tries to say, yeah, let's just love each other, guys, love each other, and that's it. That's not how you solve an issue. You need to have a conversation, you need to have agreements on things, you need to set boundaries. A lot of things need to be done, and sometimes the conditions are not met to do so. So a lot of the commentary that he was saying in this late 60s and early 70s, once again, about the Vietnam War and about a lot of other things regarding politics like the civil rights movement, felt really out of touch with reality, and I personally don't agree with a lot of the things that he was saying at the time. A message of peace is good. I like his message in songs like Imagine and in songs like Give Peace a Chance, but when you understand where they came from, when you understand the behind the scenes of a lot of the things he was saying, basically trying to make everyone adopt a certain culture, that's when you have that's when you disagree with him. That led Paul McCartney to criticize his ideologies in the song Too Many People in the album Ram. Too many people preaching practices, don't let him tell you what you want to be. Those are the lyrics for the song, and they're quite fitting because that's exactly what John Lennon was trying to do at the time. Songs like Instant Karma, Cold Turkey, Happy Christmas, War is Over, the message is beautiful, the songs are really good, some of my favorite from his entire solo output, but when you understand what they're about, you have a really big problem with it, and he wasn't really all that involved with politics until the arrival of Yoko Ono. If you want to argue that she had nothing to do with it, she was also involved in politics prior to meeting John Lennon, so I don't really understand how someone can argue that she didn't have, she wasn't participating or she didn't influence John in, this change of character that he suffered in 1968 and 1969. A lot of people are probably saying right now, well, you're talking about politics and you said this video was going to be about music. That's not what you said at the beginning of the video, and you're right, but politics affected John Lennon's music quite a lot in the early 70s and the late 60s, and that is precisely the reason why I had to bring it up. Now, that's not always the case. Albums like Plastic Ono Band and Imagine have a lot of political commentary and social too, in songs like Working Class Hero, God, Imagine, Give Me Some Truth, songs that delve into political quite heavily, but even though that's not always the case, I think that if you ask a vast majority of the John Lennon fans what is the darkest period of his career, a lot of people will point out to, his political phase in the late 60s, and Yoko Ono had a lot to do with that. Now, so far we have a very dark political phase and an unfinished music set of albums that rank among the worst pieces of music ever made, and that paint John Lennon in a different light. He wasn't a genius anymore where everything he touched was gold. We understood that he was able to make music and to have ideas that were not that great, and this woman had a lot to do with it. So now we jump into the 70s, where he was off the Beatles and he was completely alone to make the music he wanted to do, and you have Plastic Ono Band and Imagine, and in a lot of those songs, even though they might have been inspired by Yoko Ono, she had nothing to do with these songs. She didn't write any of the music, she didn't participate with any of the vocals, which resulted in 2 of his best albums. Now, Sometime in New York City is basically a duet between Yoko Ono and John Lennon. Both of them have songs in that album. Yoko Ono participates in songs like Angela, for example, while John Lennon participates in songs that I can't even name because I'm gonna get banned and I'm gonna get, a lot of hate on Twitter. This is the album where people realized how much influence Yoko Ono had in John Lennon's craft, because a lot of her political ideologies from the late 60s were exactly the same things that were said in the album Sometime in New York City, even in the songs that were performed by John. The best example would be the song Woman is the N-Word of the World, one of the most outrageous song titles and one of the most outrageous concepts that Yoko Ono liked to throw around a lot. A lot of the people that are canceling influencers on Twitter right now because they said the N-word in a jokingly manner should look at these songs by Yoko Ono and John Lennon and tell me why you support her now. Now, I understand the concept. I understand that, she was trying to say that women were being neglected and they were being abused in society. And back then, that might have been the case. I wasn't alive, but records prove that that might have been the case. However, the song itself, the name, and the lyricism is just so simplistic, and they try once again to approach an issue that's very, very complicated and that goes back hundreds of years, this time even thousands of years, and they try to solve it with a stupid song with stupid lyricism. And most of it is Yoko Ono, because a lot of the things said on this song were things that she had been saying for years before the song was even released, okay? And you want even more evidence? Albums like Mind Games, Rock and Roll, and Walls and Bridges were all made during an 18-month separation that John and Yoko had in the mid-70s. I think it was 1973 all the way up to 1974. These 2 albums barely had anything political on them, which is kind of funny because if you look at John Lennon's craft with the Beatles from 1962 all the way up to 1967, there's not a lot of politics going around, but then Yoko Ono comes into play in 1968, and from 1968 all the way up to 1972, you have a lot of politics in the music. Now, they go through an almost 2-year separation in the mid-70s, and then again, the 2 albums that came out of that separation have almost nothing to do with politics once again. I don't think that's a coincidence, and I think that anyone that doesn't see the correlation is just silly. There's a difference between saying that Yoko Ono is at fault for the quality of the records is something, but obviously she had a lot to do with the content of the albums, with what the albums were about, because Yoko Ono was seen as God in John Lennon's eyes, so I believe that anyone who's not willing to admit that she kind of had a bad impact on his craft, especially when you look at the late 60s with the Unfinished Trilogy, is just, living in a lie. Now, after the Rock and Roll album was released in 1975, which is basically just a collection of covers, not a really important album for John, he went on a hiatus that lasted for 5 years, where he tried to, raise his son and actually find some domestic happiness, and he succeeded, because the album Double Fantasy, released in 1980, finds him at the most happy and, peaceful moment we saw from John Lennon in his entire life, and it has some beautiful songs, just like Starting Over, Clean Up Time, Beautiful Boy, Watching the Wheels, Woman, and Yoko has some pretty decent songs in here too. Yes, I'm Your Angel and Beautiful Boys are, in my opinion, some of her best vocal performances. However, she does make it fucking weird in songs like Give Me Something and Kiss Kiss Kiss, songs that honestly dwell so much in the sexual and dirty side of love that is, exciting to explore, but don't really match the energy of, the album. John Lennon was singing such wholesome things and was being so romantic in a lot of these songs, and Yoko was just acting like a dominatrix in the first half of this album, and she was trying to get this like tenor quality vocals that don't really sound that great. I'm gonna put some examples here so you understand what I'm talking about, but once again, Double Fantasy would have been such a great album. When you put the songs from Milk and Honey by John Lennon and the songs from Double Fantasy, once again by John Lennon, it's an album that is so good that it definitely matches the level of quality of a record like Plastic Ono Band and Imagine, albums that are often ranked among the greatest pieces of music ever made. Like, John Lennon has always been an amazing songwriter, but you put Yoko on the mix, especially especially in Milk and Honey. I mean, some of the things she was doing in that album, my God. So when you take away all the politics, when you take away all the drama, when he's friends again with a lot of his Beatle bandmates, actually all of them, when they have this moment of domestic peace, it seems like everything is set up for a great album where she's actually melodic and she's actually trying to make beautiful music. She still manages to fuck that up too. She's never had the talent and the ability to match John Lennon, and because of that, and because John Lennon loved her and he wanted to include her in every single one of his projects, inevitably she ends up ruining part of the experience. Because once again, if you take the songs that John Lennon recorded in 1979 and 1980, the ones released in Milk and Honey and Double Fantasy, you'll have some of his best projects if you put it together, But because for every John Lennon song you have a Yoko Ono song that follows it, that is the reason why these albums are not even considered part of his best work. It just doesn't sound good. She's never been a good singer. She's never been a good artist. And that is the reason why she used to do things like this in John Lennon's performance with Chuck Berry. When it gets to the point where your mic is cut off, that's how you know that you have to start putting some more work in, trying to actually sing the songs, or you just have to try and do something else, But she insisted in being involved, and actually John Lennon insisted in involving her in his craft and in his music and in his, songwriting process, which is why I don't put all the blame on her, because John Lennon actually wanted her present in a lot of these recordings and a lot of his songwriting sessions and a lot of the recording sessions and everything that involved his craft, basically. John Lennon's solo career resulted in one of the most underwhelming discographies of all time. You have 2 great albums at the very beginning, and then after that you have a bunch of records that are a little above average. They're not great, but they're not really bad either, and it's a shame because he had the potential to be on par with the greatest musicians of the 70s, including Paul McCartney and George Harrison, both of which were releasing amazing music. And Paul is the living example of how you can include your partner in your music without completely ruining the thing in albums like Ram, McCartney 1, and every Wings album, because Linda was part of the Wings band. In other words, every project that includes Yoko Ono in it, it's doomed to fail because she comes out of an anti-music movement, anti-art. That is the reason why you find her doing this sort of things in museums. That is the reason why she basically refuses to sing in tune no matter the song we're talking about. That is the reason why in Beatles recordings she used to sabotage the recording sessions doing things like this. And I'm not trying to say that she was the one who broke up the Beatles, this narrative that a lot of people seem to believe. In my opinion, when you look at the story of the band and when you look at everything that was happening in 1968 and 1969, the band was going to break up anyway. Maybe they would have lasted a few more years without her, because it's true that she brought a really tense and awkward atmosphere to the recording sessions. She was a really big distraction for John Lennon too. I mean, there's a famous clip of George Harrison trying to record the song I Me Mine. He wanted all the band to participate in the recording of the song, and John Lennon was dancing the waltz with Yoko Ono. There's also clips of her basically doing her screams or her moans. I don't even know what to call what she was doing in this clip. It's clear that she wasn't a nice person to have around when you're trying to record, an album like Let It Be. But I don't really think that she was the one who broke up the band. But she definitely influenced John Lennon's craft in a way that is not really my favorite. In my opinion, my favorite moments of John Lennon come when Yoko Ono isn't involved. Even if the records were inspired by Yoko Ono, when John Lennon was completely alone recording something that he felt like he wanted to do, that came out really well. When he didn't, when he was something influenced by Yoko's own beliefs, or when she was participating in the songwriting and the recording of these songs, that's when the worst moment of his career happened. And that is the reason why, if you ask me, I do believe that Yoko Ono kind of ruined John Lennon's solo output. I don't think she participated in anything that I actually like about his career. I don't think she should be hated for it, because once again, John Lennon was a full-grown adult and he wanted her to be in the studio recordings. He wanted her to help him write the songs. He wanted her to contribute with some vocals, you know, so she was kind of just following along what John Lennon wanted her to do. But that doesn't mean we can't have our own opinions and we can't look at all the contributions she made for John Lennon's discography and say this is clearly some of the worst moments of his career, you know. So for that reason, I do believe that she had a really big part on how underwhelming John Lennon's solo discography was. However, that is only my personal opinion. I do want to hear what you guys think, so make sure to leave a comment down below. I personally think that Yoko Ono gets too much personal hate. I think that people make it a personal thing to attack her race, to attack her looks, to attack the way she sings, when I believe that what we should actually do is criticize her objectively based on her contributions to the music of John Lennon and to her own, you know, solo discography, because she has quite a few albums too that are terrible, by the way. There's not a single one I actually like. I also think that people exaggerate her participation in the breakup of the Beatles. It was definitely a factor, but there were other things like creative differences, George Harrison's own, you know, solo stuff being ignored, and the fact that Brian Epstein died in 1967, so the band had to get a new manager, and we all know that that manager wasn't exactly the best person in the world, and that created a lot of business problems within the band. I mean, the breakup of the Beatles is a result of a lot of different things, so the fact that people point out at Yoko and say this is your fault is a little bit unrealistic. So yeah, I want to make sure I say it again. I don't hate Yoko Ono. I don't have a problem with her as a person. I disagree with her artistic tendencies. You know, I don't believe in any of these anti-art, anti-music bullshit. I don't like any of her exhibitions in the museums. I don't like her vocal performances, and I don't like any contribution she made to John Lennon's solo discography outside of a few songs in Double Fantasy, okay? But that doesn't mean I hate her as a person, and I don't think that any hate that she gets personally for her looks or for the type of art that she likes is justified at all. This is just a criticism based on her contributions to John Lennon's discography, and that is it. With that being said, I truly hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any other videos that I upload. If you want me to talk about any other topics related to music, if you want me to check out a song, album, or artist, go ahead and leave it down below in the comments, and I'll make sure to read it and fulfill your request as soon as I can. Once again, I hope that you guys enjoyed, and I hope that I can see you soon with a new video. But until then, bye.